So PSMA Australia is actually quite a unique entity, not just in Australia but internationally. It's an unlisted public company, limited by shares, but those shares are owned by each of the states and territories and the Australian government. So that's quite an unusual arrangement. And you may well ask, well, why would you establish such an entity? Well, the reality is that as a federation where mapping responsibilities largely lie with the states and territories, there's no direct means of aggregating all of that content, aggregating all of that mapping information and location information at the national level. So without a national perspective, it's difficult then to deploy national products, to pursue national initiatives, and essentially it goes to the whole country's efficiency and global competitiveness. So governments were looking for a means of making sure that these problems could be overcome. After a great deal of discussion, it was decided that an entity at arm's length from government would actually be best placed to do that. Interestingly, because it is at arm's length from government and it's actually outside the domain of each of those governments, it funds its own activity. So government owned, but not government funded. Now, this was entirely consistent with the government policy of the day back in the mid-90s when it was established. Full cost recovery was in swing, and a commercial entity funding its own activity in this space made a lot of sense. Although today, where we have a lot more focus on open data, the question inevitably arises, well, why is PSMA a commercial entity in this space? And look, the clearest and easiest way to explain why indeed this is still a very good model is to consider where those governments sit within the context of supporting PSMA. And many of the fundamentals haven't changed. Even though governments choose now to make some of its data openly available, it doesn't change the fact that they are still at arm's length from PSMA and they're still not in a position to support its activities. They all acknowledge, however, that those activities are very important for the Australian economy and want them to continue. So the best way to think of PSMA is the first step in a chain that guarantees that the country has access to high quality national data sets. But that first step, whilst very important, isn't actually funded by any one of those governments. So yes, governments may have open data policies and PSMA may support those, but in order to do the important work of aggregating that content, it does so through a commercial model.